Yeah, I got an inch today and a quarter inch yesterday. Yes, kick ass.
Yeah. Woo. Third degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer 90, your source for FC Dallas, North Texas SC, and U.S. national team gear with everything from jerseys, soccer cards, and scarves. Soccer 90 has something for everyone. I mean, we really do have something for everyone. Shop soccer90.com now, and as listeners of this podcast, you receive 20% off your order when you use the code Third Degree at checkout. You should definitely do that. Some exclusions may apply. This podcast is also brought to you by listeners like you. If you like what we do, join us at the Patreon. Help support everything we do here at Third Degree. If you stick around at the end of the show, I'll have a little treat for you.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode numbered
172.
172 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi. Hello. It's me, Peter. Hope you're doing well. And alongside, of course, is, hold on, wait a second. It's not the same old thing because we are absent one Dan Crooke today, who has decided that other things in his life are more importante than this. And I would say that my feelings aren't hurt even a little bit. No.
Not a little bit.
Not even a little bit, no.
Yep.
But lo and behold, do not despair. Your hero, my hero, everybody's hero is still here. Editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and all-man awesome, the amazing Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Yeah, Dan has a life sometimes. I have no life other than FC Dallas, so I'm here and he's not.
Raising my hand.
Yep.
Well, we're in the middle, Buzz, of Major League Soccer All-Star extravaganzas. And I have to say, Buzz, that I learned something yesterday about you that I was mighty disappointed to learn.
Oh, what's that?
That you are not a fan of the goalie war.
I am not a fan of any all-star stuff. It doesn't matter whether you want to do goalie war or skills comps or the USA versus Mexico, any of it. I don't care.
Goalie wars kick ass.
I believe you. I just don't like showcase stuff. I like real stuff.
Why? Don't you like bits?
I like bits that are comedy bits, not bits that are like fake game bits. That's not my jam.
Do you remember the MLS All-Star competition way back when they had they put the radar gun on who could kick the ball the hardest?
Yeah, I remember all that stuff from the early days. Yeah,
wasn't it Zach Thornton, the Chicago goalkeeper, that like murdered the ball at almost 100 miles an hour?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah,
that dude could kick the ball so hard, it was frightening.
Yeah.
I only saw little bits and pieces. I guess they didn't show it on ESPN. The game's tonight. We're recording on Wednesday evening and or late afternoon or whatever it is. And the game is tonight. And I only saw bits and pieces on social media last night. I saw Jesus pinging balls off of boards in the goal, and they looked happy about it. So I guess that went well. I have no idea what else happened other than that.
I don't either. I will admit that like the last time I cared about All-Star games was when I was so young. I wasn't even aware who was in them. And my joy came from turning it on and then trying to look for like the Cowboy helmet or the Rangers jersey, and see like who was in. But, once I became a person with an adult with like actually understood sports, since then, that's not my jam. That doesn't mean, of course, that I don't understand their value. I understand why people do them. I understand why other people like them. It's not my cup of tea. So like, I know Jesus was in the skills thing and I know he did fairly well. I think I'm not, he didn't win it like Pepe did, but
So what that means is the poor pod listener is lacking our insightful punditry on the MLS All-Star event because you didn't even want to wait and record the episode tomorrow so that we could talk about the big MLS game, All-Star game. You didn't want to do that. So.
No, I do not have a breakdown on the keeper challenge for you, other than the guy that won it is a draft pick of Dallas.
Buzz, it's called a goalie war, sir.
Goalie wars? Oh, sorry.
Get
the
it
guy
right.
that won the goalie wars is a draft pick of Dallas. He was around for like a week and then vanished. I don't know whether he was not interested in Dallas or what, but he plays for Minnesota too. technically, as far as I know, Dallas still owns his MLS rights, though. So if they
Zobek?
No, Alec Smear, I believe his name is.
Oh, yes, I do remember that name.
So as far as I know, if Minnesota were to bring him up, they'd have to trade Dallas a bag of balls for the MLS rights technically, but those rights don't last forever. So eventually he would be free.
I did see that he was like a backup keeper for Minnesota. I had forgotten that he was a Dallas draft pick, but when I saw the picture of the participants, and it only looked like there was like 4 guys that did it, none of them stood out to me, and it made me wonder if MLS decided to do goalie wars, but they only used like clubs double backup guys because people are worried that goalies get hurt during goalie war.
Well, I don't know about that part. I do know that it didn't air at all. It was only like for people in the stadium, like to keep them entertained between stuff. And it was like MLS Next players. It was Minnesota 2 and somebody else's 2. And it wasn't,
It was
so it wasn't Martin Paz versus, Zach Thornton. No, it was,
Oh, that's okay. Well, that's maybe... I think goalie war is something that has value and attraction because it's so weird, and it's fun to watch. And I saw a couple highlights of it last night. There were a couple dudes just murdering the ball. Anyway. So, congratulations to Mr. Shamir for winning MLS goalie war, and hopefully he gets like a nice bonus check or something for that. And we'll see how the game goes tonight. But Buzz doesn't give a crap, so neither does this podcast.
Right.
What we do care about are the events that took place over the weekend in one Portland, Oregon. What a weird night. Well, by the way, let's just start off. It was a weird day in Major League Soccer, period. There have been plenty of really, really good articles written across the web kind of trying to capture the insanity of that particular Saturday and how it started and how it ended. Dallas's final kicks of the ball and Diego Chara's last touch of the ball ended up essentially ending. I saw Doyle tweeting. I saw multiple people talking about this. 57 goals in the course of like 8 hours. And at one point that was equitable to like 6 goals a minute, which just seems ridiculous, Buzz. But here we go. Dallas ends up getting 2 ties on the road, ending in Portland 1-1. On the other hand, you would think you'd be excited about that, but I'm not sure how I feel about this game in any shape or form.
Well, the whole weekend, the thing that was fascinating to me was the average game was 4.2 goals per game. That's astronomical. Listen, this is a game that in hindsight, I guarantee you that I said at the time that the players are going to be mad that they didn't win this game. And I asked Coach about that, and he said, yes, they were. Now, granted, they almost lost the game as well, but they walked into that building and played some really good soccer, and they should have won that game. So there's a okay positivity of a point on the road, okay some positivity of a good performance. Pissed that you didn't win that game. Pissed at yourself that you didn't take advantage of the opportunities and win that game. It should have been won by FC Dallas, and it was not.
So what? So you say they're pissed, and when you say they're pissed, what are they pissed at the very clear and obvious opportunities that they didn't convert? Or are they pissed more that they gave up the goal?
No.
What is the area of disappointment or upsetness?
Well, pissed is a little strong. I think it's more of a conflicting emotion, that some relief that they got out of there with the point, but recognition that the opportunity was there to take that game, some anger, personal anger of like, I should have had this or I should have had that. And Nico talked to them about, he often talks to them about having the bravery to think you can go in places and play, and that they did that. And they went in there and played a pretty even game, and I think had more possession than Portland did on their home field. And they had less shots, but they had more clear-cut scoring opportunities that didn't result in technical shots, but were there for the taking. And so some disappointment, perhaps more than anger, that they're annoyed or recognized a missed opportunity. Look, when you look at, I didn't look these stats up, but I know Dallas has won once in their history in Portland. And I'm pretty sure Seattle's the same, one or never. I'm sure if you looked up LAFC, it would be the same. When you go out to the West Coast and play these really good teams on the road, they've never, ever, ever gotten any results in these places. And now if you're talking about a team that's trying to get to the top of the Western Conference to compete, you need to eventually, unless you could spend like LA and get the number one position, you need to eventually be able to win games like this on the road. So this was a moment of recognition of this is a game that was there for the taking. We didn't quite get it, and we could have, but we're so close. And so that's some mixed feelings and some disappointment and some frustration at themselves as a group, but not like anger at their teammates or anything like that. I think annoyed that they didn't get it when they could have.
Did you, I don't remember, did you say Paz was the man of the match? Is that who you awarded it to?
I went with Siki for half of a game. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal. Right. I mean, you could have picked Paz. He was probably the broadcast pick, I would imagine.
All right, hold on. Put a pin in Siki. I want to save him till later in the conversation. I want to talk about how the game kind of played itself out a little bit, because it is it's a difficult place to play. The surface is different. The scene and the atmosphere is clearly different. I was kind of surprised to see that the stadium wasn't full. It's very rare to not see Providence Park packed to the rim. That was a little weird. I don't know what's going on there. But it was, and maybe that's a reflection of the Timbers themselves, because they're not great, by the way. What were I guess the biggest question is, because we found out early in the game or before the game that Paxton was out for the entire game. He wasn't even on the bench. Yeah. With a minor injury, but it was the debut of Sebastian Lletget. And I'm interested in your kind of take on his, after just showing up with the team and being there for less than with the guys for 48 hours, his debut for the club.
I thought he was terrific. We knew coming in that he was likely to see action, certainly because the coach is very familiar with him. He's been playing for New England a lot. It's not like he's been sitting, so he's game fit, right? He knows the system because it's the same system from the national team. He knows this coach because it's the same coach from when he's with the national team. Not the head coach, but one of the same coaches up until recently. So he plays in a lot of ways. He plays just like Paxton. He has some of the same profiles that a midfield that Paxton does, except that Lletget has the ability to get forward into the box and convert more goals and assists than Paxton does. This is the thing we've talked about Paxton missing, playing that free position. So I actually have an expectation, and I did ask Coach about this, and he said it is certainly a possibility that, when everyone's healthy, Lletget might play that more free role, and Paxton can play more of a box-to-box role, or he can play like a deeper double, an 8 and a double pivot look. There are some versatility and some options there. So putting Lletget in for Paxton is a very simple swap that doesn't change anything in your system. Everyone else can play around him exactly the same. There is some familiarity with some of the players from other guys that have been in the national team. So it's about the easiest transitions you're ever going to see for a guy to come right in and play. And I thought he was fine. He didn't fall down and not do any things that you wanted him to do. He passed at like an 87% passing rate. That's pretty fine. He
had early runs into spaces and behind. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, 11 duels. He kept popping up into the box in the underneath role, which is what you want him to do. That little gap. You kept seeing him exploit the movement of Jesus. You saw him exploit the movement of Alan Velasco, which we'll come back to when we talk about him later. Just a really good performance right out of the gate. And it was part of why they were able to compete in Portland. What's not to like, frankly?
All right. So the other part of this was the news that you broke. I think you were the one that broke this, that Dallas essentially isn't, they paid for him in the form of Garber funny money. Yeah. But they're not paying his salary.
Yeah. You remember last time we joked that when I saw Zanata again, I was going to say, hey, you told me that you wouldn't be able to do anything. Well, I did that when I saw him. I said that to him, and he said, well, I also said that if we thought something could help the team, we would go after it. And I said, well, yeah, sure. But I thought I was speaking in terms of salary cap. And he says, oh, well, it's probably not been reported yet. I don't think it was reported that New England's paying his salary. And that's how we were able to fit him in and under. I was like, wow, that's great news. I'm tweeting that out. So, yeah, it's an even better deal. The funny money, the GAM money, to me, they paid a touch more than New England did in the first place, but the New England version had all these exploding, like $1.5 million if you met certain metrics or whatever. the bottom line is that New England clearly, through their moves, is dumping roster and cap for next season already. That's the only way I can read it. When you have a guy that's getting paid for what for you obviously seems like probably too much money, up near $1 million, if you're trying to get rid of a contract like that, you often have to jump through hoops to make it happen. Yes, Dallas gave them damn money back, which all sort of balances out on the spreadsheets and all that stuff. But the bottom line is someone has to pay the guy and have that money hit their actual cap, and that apparently is New England. So that makes the deal even sweeter for Dallas right now, and that you added I did a thing on the website that was a recap of the 30-man roster by position that I do like in the winter. And we had this one glaring veteran 8 hole we've been talking about since February. They finally were able to fill it in a way that benefits them long term, because this guy's that fits the coach's system and fits the way the team plays, and it's a perfect addition to help their midfield in so many ways. And there's even a greater value, which I'll talk about again later. You sometimes you make a move that could have handicapped you now, but isn't. It actually is benefiting you now because New England was clearly, obviously, by the fact they're paying the salary, desperate. You see this move in other leagues. Teams paying part of salaries or all of salaries. Or like I remember when Dallas loaned the kid, the Chilean kid, when they loaned him back to Chile. You remember who I'm talking about? His name's, I'm brain farting, I don't remember his name.
Oh.
The little kid, the Mauro Diaz replacement. When they loaned him back to Chile, he was getting paid so much here in Dallas that no one in Chile could afford him. So Dallas had to pay his salary. They had to send money to the Chilean team to basically cover his salary because, now that's not on your books here, but it's how these things work when you're trying to move a player off your books that you don't want anymore. That's just par for the course, that you got to overpay to get rid of the guy. It's for New England. It's all about next year. They cleared $1 million player off their contract for next year.
Yeah, the trick for Hunt and Zanata is how they figure that out for next season, because he's going to be another $1 million salary, and if they're already up against the cap, I'm assuming they are planning on dropping some much-needed droppage in terms of large salary players. There's several guys, Mr. Frank O'Hara being one of them. But I thought Leggett was a really nice addition to the team. I most was pleased by the clear chemistry that he has, not just with Jesus, but with Areola. A lot of the 1-2 work that they were doing was really nice. And and what I do think becomes the interesting thing, and maybe we'll see that this weekend, assuming he's healthy again, is it does two things. One, I'm looking forward to seeing him play with Paxton, but it also very much exposed the current form of one Brandon Cervania.
Yeah, well, Brandon was not particularly good in the first half, and he's actually, I'm assuming he's going to show up as out this week because he was missing. He's had a reoccurrence of whatever it is that's going on in his lower abdomen that's causing these issues lately. I thought it was a rib thing, but now they're saying it's something else. So he's gone to
thing or something.
Like it's related to abductor. I asked if it was a hernia, and he said no. I'm not really clear what it is. Apparently, it's not a big deal, but he was out getting like some scans, and so they're going to have to do something. I'm not really sure. They acted like it was no big deal, and I'm going to take them at their word on that. The bottom line is I don't think Brandon's going to be available this weekend, and certainly if he was having problems with that maybe was an indicator of why he didn't play amazingly. I thought he was perfectly okay. I just thought Siki was much better with his energy and movement, and the team fed off of it, and that really enlivened the game. And some of the differences between those two players are related to what the coach likes, and that's, again, something I want to get back to in a minute. And I just thought that it was more about Siki's ability to pick the ball up and turn and make these bursting moves forward and catching Portland off guard with that. And that kind of enlivened the game a little bit. He's getting better with his passing going forward. He's getting better at his defensive positioning. Like, we don't see him chasing down and fouling like we did originally. He's anticipating the game better. So phenomenal progression continues to happen with Siki. And in the context of that game, he was the player that just jumped out at me as it was a step forward clearly for him. Now, if one of the guys up front had buried some of those chances, they probably would have taken man of the match, because those guys didn't play poorly. They just didn't rise to the moment like I felt Siki did.
Yeah, I thought Zeke's introduction to the game was noticeable. The comparison I was making initially was just the quality difference between Leggett and Cervania.
Oh, yeah.
I think that to me was the most stark. I mean, there are certainly differences between Cervania and Siki, and they both have their pros and cons. And the cons on Siki tend to get smaller and smaller, and the Brandon cons tend to grow a little bit of late. But just in the first half, watching Brandon play and his kind of body language and his attitude towards the game is very in stark contrast to how Leggett plays. And Leggett just feels like a next level kind of player. And that's, to me, was the big difference.
Yeah, Leggett's in the prime of his career. He's approaching the tail off portion of his career, but he's still in the flat plateau prime of his career. He's as good as he's going to get. He's in full season form. He's in Friends of the National Team form. Brandon is a player who has come up through the U.S. youth system, but hasn't progressed to the next level. He's 21, 22, somewhere in that neck of the woods. He still has 6 or 7 years of improvement. In 8 or 9 years, maybe he'll be better than Leggett is right now. But clearly right now, this is the difference between a top flight, legitimate frontline MLS starter, U.S. national team U.S. national team pool player in the peak of his career versus a kid who is still an up and down roller coaster, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. You know, it's like he is a much more inconsistent than, say, Paxton, who is back to peak Paxton so far and continues to improve all the time. Brandon, there's some concerns there in my mind, at least. And that such a lifestyle, even between Paxton and Leggett, you can see the difference between a guy in the prime of his career and the prime of his confidence and Paxton, who's still growing. There are different players in different quality stages of their careers.
The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, because I feel like, and it would be accurate to say that I've been critical of Velasco. And I would also say that I'm still a little bit critical on him based on the Portland game. He had his shot creations and goal creation opportunities were 0 in that game, which is, for shot creation in particular, is unusual for him. But I do think what we have that has gone a bit ignored, and maybe this is my fault, is that there has been what I think now a pretty clear downturn in the form of Paul Arriola. And that's the thing that I think maybe in many ways is somewhat more concerning. And the moment in the game where Paz completely reads the situation perfectly, plays that perfect ball to Paul, who also, by the way, reads the situation perfectly and ends up one-on-one with the goalkeeper, only to allow that in the way that he makes his decisions to play that, to end up getting it blocked, I thought was really disappointing, and really kind of a synopsis. If you really look at Arriola's games over the last 5, however long it's been. By the way, Buzz, if I was going to ask you, when was the last time Paul Arriola scored a goal? Do you know how long ago it's been?
Oh, a month?
It was the Austin game back on July the 15th. That is the only goal he has scored in his last 9 games for Dallas.
Yeah, I think I wrote in our Discord, for like 10 minutes into the game, something like, Paul Arriola's off tonight. And it was just little things, like little touches, little moments where the ball kind of bounced away 5 inches further than he would like. The ball's hitting the post, little decisions. I definitely think that's kind of what went wrong with the whole game was, listen, I'm not a believer in the XG stat at all, and particularly for a single game, I'm not a believer. But if you look at this team, the players that you expect to have XG are Jesus, Arriola, and Velasco. Those are the guys, right? And Arriola was roughly 0.5, so half of a chance. Velasco was 0.2, a quarter of a chance. But like those moments were the moments that were there for the taking, and they're the moments that didn't translate. They're the moments where you say, like you say, Arriola's in on the goalie and he makes the wrong decision. Velasco's got opportunities to create key passes. Usually he has 2, 3, 4. There was a game the other day where he had 5 key passes, and this one he had 0. And it's just like, Jesus, I thought was great. I think Jesus probably had like 3 key passes. So Jesus was on his game, but he was on his game in a deeper, kind of a little more of a playmaking. He didn't go all the way back to the midfield, but he wasn't high in the box like we would want him to be. So I think that's when we talk about them being a little bit disappointed, I think that's where it comes in. this was a game where some ruthlessness or some efficiency or some je ne sais quoi, I don't even know what it would be, like that ability to find that little extra something and take the game wasn't quite there. And I think that's was pretty obvious with all the guys up front was just off that night.
Well, I don't even think it's that night, Buzz. I do think that I do think that we have talked a lot about at the beginning of the season. What was driving kind of the excitement was a high efficiency in finishing. The few opportunities they've made, that clearly has downturned over the course of the last, 10 plus games. But what I continue to just get mad at, like I just want to throw something at the television, and this was this happened in the Seattle game. This also happened in L.A. This happened in Portland, which is Dallas. There's a stat for this somewhere in somebody's database, and if somebody knows where this is, I'd love to see it. But Dallas absolutely has to lead this league in being handed non-forced turnovers in their opponents defending half of the field, and almost 9 times out of 10 not just not scoring, but not even turning it into a dangerous opportunity. And that continues to drive me bonkers about this team, is that they're just killer instinct in capitalizing on other teams' mistakes is a glaring problem. What eventually I think is going to differentiate them being like a legitimate playoff contender and just a team that shows up in the playoffs potentially and loses in the first round.
Yeah, that efficiency is an issue. I was just looking at the shot charts, and Jesus had the only shot on target, and it was from outside the box. All the other shots that came from inside the box were Velasco and Areola, and Velasco put both of his wide, and Areola's was hit the post and blocked. And those were all the shots they had from inside the box, was those 4. Everything else was from range, which is not what you want. So in the game before, we talked about the lacking that one final little move into the box to get yourself a good shooting opportunity. So, the efficiency, what for me has fallen off is it's not necessarily the efficiency as much as it is like making the one further is a little bit of, I'm not going to call it panic, but a little bit of like edginess that it's like, oh man, I got to score, I got to get this. And sometimes that's the wrong vibe to be having. The vibe needs to be patience in the final moment, the right choice in the final moment, the calmness in the final moment. You don't want to be panicking. You don't want to be making poor decisions. So some of that I put down to the youth of the team. Some of that I put that down to the recent struggles. I think they'll come through it. I hope they'll come through it. Some of this is going to be coaching. The coach is going to have to work on immensely, in terms of that final third stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a thing that's deficient right now. They're winning these games because their defense is keeping them in games. They're tying games because their defense is keeping them in games before the offense was doing it. So it's definitely a different coin from beginning of the season.
Do we continue to express any concern over Martinez, and whatever weird ailment is going on with that dude? Steve, I thought was pretty revealing in his kind of trying to explain it when he went down again and had to be subbed out in the 59th minute. And I don't know. There's just something really worrisome about the fact that one of your 2 starting center backs can't consistently get past or do a full 90 minutes. That really is weird to me.
Yeah, they actually, I think, have a long-term center back issue because Martinez has this thing that can sometimes happen with contact, if I remember correctly, where his muscles kind of lock up. And you could tell when he was standing there, and it looks like all of his muscles are cramping in his legs. You could see it when they were showing him. Mm-hmm. You also have to consider that Hedges' age, he also tails off late in games, because he's not 27, he's 32, right? So it's like we're starting to get into that kind of window with him. Nikosi gets out there and he has all the physical tools right now, but he's so inexperienced, and this is why it annoys me we don't play him more. He's so inexperienced that he falls asleep for a second, or he makes the wrong choice here or there. And beyond that, they got nothing. So it's like they definitely have a center back issue going forward, and I think they know it. I think they're recognizing that that's possible. Because I watch in training and I watch them aggressively work other combinations than just Hedges and Martinez, so they can get guys used to each other. That when they need to go to them, they can have this confidence in this teamwork play. So I think they know that's a problem.
Well, it was interesting because by the time, because the game was so weird, but when the 65th minute or whenever Farfan had to go out with that weird situation, and now Nanu is playing at left back, and the last time Nanu played left back as a backup was the Austin game where he gave up that turnover that ended up leading to their tying goal. That was all very much hands and fingers over the eyes for the next 30 minutes or so as Dallas just continued to try and it worked out, right? Like, I mean, yes, they gave up the goal in extra time and all of that, but with Farfan's injury and Martinez situation, I don't know, man. It is a bit of a relief that they ended up at least getting a point considering all the game situations.
Yeah, I actually thought Nanu was all right. That was one of his better performances. This team gives up too many PKs and too many fouls right outside the top of the box that result in free kicks. That's something they need to work on. I think that's a sign of sort of rash emergency defending because you've been dragged out of position a little bit. Those are things those are telltale signs that defense isn't quite as locked down as you'd like it to be. But yet, we have to be honest that the good goals against this year is why this team's in the position as it is. The beginning of the year, they had a really nice defense and they got really low numbers and won a lot of games. And that's why they're halfway decent, in this terms of the standings. So it's not panicking or anything, but there's definitely some cracks showing in the defense that need to be addressed. And injuries compound it, and the long season compounds it. I'm sure the heat compounds it. It's something we're going to have to watch for sure.
Just a check.
Sorry. Something in your throat, Peter?
Sorry. Did I say that out loud? All right.
Listen, I don't know that what is Che 19 now? I don't know that this coach likes 19-year-olds. I'm not sure that'd be helping. To be honest with you.
Well, okay. Show me what you got. It's a better option.
I don't. But that's. I'm not sure it would be. I mean, right now, I don't know that he would get in over Quinones, for example.
Well, okay. Well, that's probably because he's been banging around in the German version of NTPSA for the last year, and okay, that's an exaggeration.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I know he wants to be there. If that's where he wants to apply his trade.
Yeah, you can't force him to come back if he doesn't want to.
More power to him. So the game was really weird, and I appreciate the fact that Dallas stuck it to Portland and broke a bunch of Rose City hearts at the end of the game. I'm frustrated by the missed opportunities. I thought that was really disappointing. But I will say with the debut of Leggett, and I'm hoping. I guess I'm going to ask you my next question is: do you know what Paxton's health situation is for this weekend?
I know that he and Facu are close and that they are closer than some other guys. So, based on what I saw in training, it would not shock me to see either Paxton or Facu play. I would, if I had to bet money, I would not bet on that. But if they are both, one or both of them were in, that wouldn't shock me either. I talked to Paxton for about 10 seconds, and he's obviously always optimistic when he's in, Paxton is. Yeah. It's just a little thing. He confirmed that it's no big deal, because he and I talked a little bit about how good he's feeling otherwise with all the other stuff we're actually worried about, and he was like, oh, it's great. I feel awesome. He always says that, but I believe him this time because of the way he's playing, so I'm not concerned about Paxton. If he's in, that'd be great, but I wouldn't bet on it.
All right, so now we've also, because of you mentioned Facu and his extended absence due to injury, where are you in the Edwin Cerrillo meter?
Same. I love his range. I love the improvement in the game reading defensively. I agree with Steve Davis that Edwin needs a nasty streak. He needs to learn that there are times you just got to wreck a dude. And he doesn't. He's a little too nice. This was a problem Jordan Stone had too. Sometimes you got to be nasty when you're playing as a six. Where Edwin's deficiencies are, particularly compared to Facundo, is in presenting himself in good positions to relieve pressure from his backs, from his defense. Facundo is better at showing and building out through passing, putting himself in a good spot and being able to pass forward. Edmonds better at recovery and then turning and moving away with the ball at his feet like Siki does. Not that good, but he's better at it than Facundo. Facundo movement is not Facundo's thing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot Edwin is still learning, and I think he can improve at those areas of it's not defensive reading. It's once we've won it reading. Where do I need to be to get the ball out of the back end, to help my center backs out, to present myself as an opportunity to build forward? He's reacting late on that stuff still. And I've watched them in training. They're pointing stuff out to him. And he's working on it. And hopefully he'll improve at it, hopefully. And then the nasty streak thing, I don't know. Sometimes people are just not mean enough. They're just too nice. And I do worry that Edwin is just too nice a kid. There comes a time, remember Simo Valakari? Oscar Pereira used to say that Simo off the field was the nicest guy he ever met, but on the field, he was the biggest bastard he ever met. And that's what you got to be like if you're going to be a 6. So I'm not sure Edwin has that yet. And that's another thing he can learn from Facundo. And so I'm still optimistic that Edwin has a upside. But for right now, I think those guys are going to continue to play split time. And probably once Facundo's healthy, I'm sure he'll be a starter again. But we'll see.
Okay. And what was your take? Because we mentioned him earlier, but didn't really talk about his game. What was your takeaway of Velasco's performance in Portland?
Not bad. The particular thing that was noticeable, and I've noticed the last couple of games, and I actually asked Nico about it, and he confirmed it, is that Velasco is playing much more aggressively as what we would traditionally call, a lot of people will call a false wing. He's doing a lot of popping up in the center channel. He's not quite a 10. He's not quite a real wing. He's kind of doing both. So they're giving him a lot of freedom to balance that wide play with the coming underneath play, occupying, what Dan calls zone 14 underneath the striker. You want, in this particular system, you want both of your 8s and both of your wings to pop into that space. So Velasco's doing that more, and you can see it in the heat maps the last couple of games. He's having this presence inside. And so I was watching that, and so I asked Coach about it, and they said, yes, absolutely, we want him to do that. We're working on him with that, to take advantage of those opportunities where he can pick up the ball in different spaces and make those attacking moves and those attacking dribbles. So, again, the kid's a work in progress. He's learning how to play at a league that is different than where he came from. The defenses are different. The systems are different. He's not just a dribble at guys anymore. He now needs to pick up by the size of his game. And so his defensive positioning has gotten better. And overall, I'm relatively happy with the progression. And I thought, other than his failure to capitalize and get himself some scoring opportunities, because he like Areola had moments where he could have taken the game and didn't. That's, those, when you're paying a guy that kind of money, you better be doing some really fancy things when you get those moments, right? That's what I did my post-game thing. I talked about needing us, if you're going to overcome these road games against these very difficult teams, you need these special players to be special. And somebody was like, you tell me that kid's not special? Yeah, but you got to rise above the game and recognize the moment and make it happen if you want to be considered among the special players. And that's where all 3 of those guys on the front line didn't do that in this game. But they're all kids, while Ariel's not. Jesus and Velasco have a lot of growing still to do, and those moments, Jesus wants those moments. I don't know that Velasco wants them yet, but Jesus for sure does.
Yeah, I was very frustrated. I mean, the Areola opportunity miss was pretty bad, but Velasco's was maddening in the fact that he had a simple tap in with his left, I think it was his left foot, and yet he tried to skill check his way to his right foot and ends up blowing it over the top. And that to me is just bad decision making, and it's a lack of confidence. You got 2 feet for a reason, and at this level you should be able to you should have the awareness just to tap that ball in with your left foot on the easy opportunity. But I'm also not the guy out on the field, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, sometimes there are little bitty intangibles. Colin Clark used to say, when everyone that gets to this level can play, the difference is sometimes hard to define. It's the mind or the will. It's these tiny little moments.
Yeah.
And that was one he missed. He could have won the game right there. And then he had another one where he fired it kind of curving and wide, didn't get it on frame. Get it on frame, man. Give yourself a chance. But again, 19, I know. I look at other 19-year-olds that can't even get their shoes on right. This kid's playing at a pretty good level. I mean, he's not where we want him to be, but I'm not too upset with the progression. Is making me happy.
All right, so Dallas goes on the road to the dreaded Pacific Northwest duo of road games and comes away with a point. And do you call it a moralistic win in Seattle, Buzz? A moral win? A 1-0 loss? Just losing only losing 1-0 in Seattle, is that a moral win?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a pretty decent performance. I mean, look, Seattle, I know people say that Seattle's a little bit off this year, but they're getting guys healthy. And I would not bet at all that they're not going to end up at higher end than Dallas in the playoffs by the time the season's over. I think Seattle's a good team. You know, they're kind of roundabout. They've been missing Rui Diaz. They've lost João Paulo for the year and his backup. They're trying to figure out how to get around that. You know, they're getting better. I think anytime you go into Portland and rotate half your into Seattle and rotate half your starters and put on a pretty good performance and give yourself a shot, I think that's a pretty good result. I'm not upset about either one of these opportunities. You know, when you're talking about a young team still trying to learn and with a very short bench, remember, keep in mind they got like 6 dudes they use. They used all of them in Seattle.
Well, there's an interesting game coming up Saturday night because San Jose comes to town. Now, San Jose's an interesting case because San Jose hasn't won a game in a while, but San Jose is also unbeaten. And I think it's their last 9 or 10 matches against Dallas. I think it's like 4-5 or 5-5. And they're also coming off a come from behind draw on the road. So they're doing their version of our Pacific Northwest trip. They've been stuck in Texas because they just came from behind to get a 3-3 draw down in Austin. And we know Austin's a pretty good side, but we love them dropping points. So this is not, despite their place in the table, this is definitely no shape or form a gimme, but it is absolutely a game that I think we all would agree Dallas needs to get 3 points.
Yeah, when you're a team that's in the top half of the Western Conference and you're playing a team in your house that's in the bottom half of the conference, you should win these games. I know San Jose is probably improving. I know that they just had a couple decent, ties lately. They haven't won games, but it's like that doesn't change the fact that this is a team you should beat, and that therefore you need to. It's like home points are massive. You only have a limited number of them left. It's not that many points between yourself and the out of the playoffs still. I mean, we talk about how it's nice to be, third place or whatever. But when you get right down to it, Dallas is sitting on 36 points, and Seattle, who's 8th, is 32 points. They're literally 4 points behind you. So it's like you can't be muddling around and dropping home points. It's like you got to put this one away. This needs to be this can't be one of these games where you're like, oh, we're better than San Jose. We don't have to really try. No, you need to be ruthless and stomp on this team when they come in here. Treat it as if LAFC is coming in and put on your A game and try and wreck them, because if you sort of just let them stay in the game, they're going to give you problems like they did Austin.
Yeah. Let's see. So the last time they won is on a road game against LA, and that was 5 games ago. Since then, they've lost 3 and tied 2. So in terms of lineups and formations, any predictions for the San Jose game? 8:00, by the way.
Yeah, well, I would imagine that Jesus and Arriola will come back and be fine. The All-Star games are not taxing. Velasco will be fine. Lletget should be in there now. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to ever take him out of the lineup. As I mentioned, Paxton was on the side, and Brandon is basically, if they don't list him as out, I'll be really surprised, because I don't think there's any way he's playing. So you're looking at probably Lletget and Siki in the midfield, because I don't think Paxton can go, probably. I wouldn't bet on him going. Let me put it that way. Same with Facundo. He did stuff on the side, so again, he's close, but I wouldn't put money on it. So you're looking at Cerrillo again. The problem is that both Farfan and Shun, we don't care about Shun at this point, but Farfan came out of the locker room like late in training and was like in sneakers. So he wasn't like dilly-dallying on the side like Paxton. He was like complete rehab mode. So I'm not at all optimistic that Farfan will play. I'm going to assume Farfan's out at this point.
Okay.
Which I think leads you to Nanu starting either at right back with Tuamasi left, or just Nanu left. And more than likely, probably back to Martinez and Hedges, unless Martinez is worse than we think. But otherwise, I don't think you'd want to go with. I mean, I would go with Nicosi all season, but since that hasn't happened, you kind of are stuck on Martinez Hedges, particularly if Nanu's got to be in there at left back. Then you definitely want Martinez for his experience in reading. So, and then Paz, of course, is basically it. So the midfield and left back is the question marks for Dallas.
that is interesting that if Siki does, because we talked a little bit about his performance in the second half in Portland, which was very exciting, and there are clear upsides to his game. What I want to know now is he over what has been ailing him and causing him to come out of games 20 minutes in?
Forgot to ask.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, I suck.
Because here's the deal. This is what you're thinking. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, if they go into this game and Paxton is not ready to go and Cervania's hurt and Siki starts the game and he has another one of these episodes 25 minutes into the game, who comes in and plays center mid?
Yeah, well, it ain't going to be Thomas.
Oh, I was leading you down the primrose path to make that announcement.
I know. It ain't going to be him. I can tell you that.
Have they officially broken up with Thomas?
The coach has. That's my hot take that I wanted to give you.
Oh.
I'll explain why.
Okay.
The coach would never say that, but that's a good question. Tuamasi's played a little 8 before. If Paxton's close and he could be on the bench, then that's fine. Or Facundo, if he's on the bench, then he can come in as an 8. It's not great, but he can do it. Honestly, Velasco can go in the middle. You can do a double pivot and drop Leggett deeper next to Edwin and have Velasco be more like or Jesus too. He and Velasco both can. You can bring in Hara and Jesus can drop in as a 10 in front of a double pivot. Point being that Leggett can drop deeper and do the 6-8 combo with Edwin. Mm-hmm. There's ways to work around it if Siki has to be pulled.
Okay.
You go 3 at the back. Like they did the other day. But it ain't going to be Thomas.
Okay. So what's your take on the Thomas Roberts situation?
So this is actually a bigger epiphany is the wrong word. I was watching North Texas play. I was watching Thomas play. And some thoughts were going through my head.
Oh, he played for North Texas?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Came in the second half.
Did he score 100 goals in 45 minutes?
No, but he looked good. But here, let me get through this thing. So do you remember the story I told earlier in the year when Paxton tried to run through Matt Hedges in practice and basically broke himself and then had to leave practice? It was
vaguely, yes.
Back in March. And I said to Coach, jokingly, will you tell Paxton to quit doing that? And he's like, no, he's got to fight through it. I was like, okay. Because this is when he was still coming back from stuff. And just since then, I've watched this coach make choices about players. And we can talk about some of them. For example, he likes guys that have good soccer brains and high-level soccer understanding of the concepts they're doing. But he also likes grinders and warriors. He likes Facundo over Edwin, right? The old guy with experience who can grind and dig in. He likes Siki over Brandon. Brandon is a smooth kind of drift around, kind of pick the ball up. Siki is a tenacious, attacking, aggressive bulldog of a player. He loves Paxton. He loves Paxton so much, Paxton didn't have a backup, even though he was coming off these injuries, right? Yep. This coach likes guys who are think about what we talked about at the beginning of the year with the training, how training changed, how training was focused and intense. It's like we are here to work. We are professionals. This is not a joke. We are not messing around. We are training. He likes guys that show up every day and bring it hard in training. He loved that Paxton tried to run through Hedges in training. That's my point, is that this dude likes guys that will claw the guy's eyes out in order to try and win the game and to reflect that all the time. So I'm watching North Texas play, and I'm watching Thomas, and he's the same. I don't know. It's been so long since you've seen him play, probably.
I don't even remember the last time I saw Thomas Roberts play soccer.
He's a glider. He drifts. He slides into pockets. He picks up the balls and makes these splitting passes. He picks the ball off of players, and he kind of lopes away. He's constantly floating and drifting. He's never exploding. He's never smashing guys. He's never digging hard. It's just not the way he is. He's a great player, in my opinion. There are guys in the organization that think he's really special. But for this coach, sometimes coaches just have a kind of player they like, and that's who they're going to build with. Look how short this bench is. Look where Shun is. Shun, who went from having like 6 assists and 4 starts or whatever toward the latter part of the season to like completely out of the team now. Well, Shun is a happy-go-lucky kind of everything is a frivolous kind of trainer. This coach traded the offensive explosiveness of Ryan Hollingshead for a defensive-minded, dogged left back. Ryan Hollingshead, as much as he was the emotional leader of this team, was never captain because he's a terrible trainer. He only does enough during the week to get himself ready. He doesn't lead by work ethic like Matt Hedges does. So I think you have to, for me, this is an epiphany about this coach. It explains the short bench. It explains why certain guys are not getting any chances. It explains why he's going out and trading for Areola and Leggett, these smart veteran MLS guys that know how to grind and fight and compete. You can look at almost any player on the field except for Velasco, who's about the $9 million you paid. You can look at almost any other player on the field, and you can see the choice being made because of these characteristics that this coach likes. So that's why I watched Thomas play for 30 minutes against North Texas, and I'm like, he's never going to get a minute of action for this coach. It doesn't matter what he does, in my opinion. This is 100% just my opinion. It doesn't matter what he does in training. That kid is not getting back into the fold here because of the way he plays. Just like the look of him, the way he moves. You know how it is, Peter, when you watch a game, certain guys speak to you. This coach, Thomas, does not speak to this guy. Shun does not speak to this coach. So you can look at any guy on the field and think about how he is as a player and think about, is that going to make this coach excited about getting him in? No, that's why there's like 5 dudes that play off the bench and that's it.
Oh, I mean, Buzz, you and I have been around this for a really long time, and I think we could go from all the way going back to Dave Durr. Every coach has at least one, if not multiple players on their roster that the fan base or people in the media go like, why are they not using this guy? And it's because the coach just doesn't, for whatever reason, they got a guy on their roster that they just don't like something about, and they're in the doghouse or they're just not going to get the opportunity. And, sometimes those guys go to other teams and flourish, and sometimes they go to other teams and you're like, oh no, the coach was right. That guy does suck. And that's just how it happens. And in this case, I think poor Thomas is...
Yeah, and Shun.
I mean, Shun's situation is really interesting to me because, that's a guy who clearly has interest at his national team level. We saw a lot of interesting things about his game. I'm interested in knowing what it is about Shun's game. And maybe is it this kind of like laissez-faire attitude that he plays with? Is that what it is? It's not a skill set thing or a tactical thing.
He's kind of he's a bubbly, chuckly personality. Like practice is kind of fun and lighthearted for him. He's not out there just crushing dudes and like fighting through like Paxton does. He kind of is. I call it a bright personality. He's not this intense, focused. He's always distracted by going off with the national team. I think Shun's a good player. I wish they would use him. But sometimes a guy just like the wrong way rubs the coach right out of the gate. I remember when they brought in this guy, this left back one time who from somewhere to South America that's supposed to be great. He was in camp for like a week and a half, and Oscar went to the people and said, that guy will never play for me, get rid of him. And it was just like oil and water. Sometimes that happens with coaches. And I think you can look at lots of dudes on this roster that don't play. Like, look how they shipped out Hernandez. I couldn't, to begin with, tell you why they loaned Hernandez out. But look how Khalil doesn't play. You don't even get a minute from him. It's just the way he looks at players, is different than the way I look at players. And it's not a criticism. It's just, it finally occurred to me, like, what it is that he gets real excited about and what it is he's playing for. And it's a combination of the Leggett trade and then watching Thomas play and being like, oh, and it kind of hit me.
Yeah.
And so I think you can honestly look at the entire roster that way, and you can look at any given positional battle and you can see it break out that way pretty much. Look at how Obrion, like, there's a verticality there that's nice, but think about like how poor his decision making is, or how he doesn't know where to get defensively. Again, that's the smart side. Or maybe like he's only active and aggressive for maybe like half the time he's in there. Again, not something the coach loves. This guy wants relentless, dogged fighters and guys with experience and brains. It makes me wonder when the next academy kid's ever going to play, because like both of those things aren't exciting to this coach. Like, to play the kids is done as near as I can tell. Like, I think he would hate Dante Seeley, for example. I don't know if he even knows anything about Dante Seeley, but what I know about Dante Seeley, I almost guarantee that if he were to come back, this coach would be like, no thanks.
Well, that may pose to be a problem because that's a critical component of the entire business model of FC Dallas. So that seems like the two forces about to collide with each other. So I will watch that but I think the big takeaway is what happens to Thomas now. We obviously love the kid and want nothing but for the best for him. But if you're right, then they just need to let him go find another team to play on.
There's got to be no way they'll pick up his option. He's on an option year. I got $1. Okay. I'm just going to bet straight out that he'll never play for this coach, and that at the end of the season they won't pick up his option. Okay. It's just not. There's too many guys on this team that don't fit this coach. And listen, Peter, we talk about all the time, right? 3-year cycle. Remember how much they talked about it was a process? What they meant was half this roster I don't want. It's going to take us 2, 3, 4 windows to get it straightened out. So it's a process, right? And that's part of it. And you can see now halfway into the season who plays and who doesn't, who is part of his team going forward and who isn't. Sometimes there's guys that surprise me, like Benny. I thought there's no way that Benny would be the kind of player that coach likes, but he talks about how good Benny is in training. And I'm like, boy, that's not the Benny I remember from the academy. So credit to Benny. He's changed his ways. Benny Regic. He's become the kind of player that this coach likes. Hey, good on you, Benny. Nice job. So he's in the picture, and Thomas is not.
Yep.
And this is just my read. Like, no one has said this to me with the team. It was just, I was watching Thomas silky smooth gliding around, picking the ball up, and I'm like, oh man, I bet this coach freaking hates that. Just the way he does it,
Man, they're gonna get rid of him and not pick up his option, and now my Tommy Poo FC Dallas jersey is gonna be worthless.
No, it's still important to you, man. That's
okay.
what matters.
Thanks, Buzz.
Yeah.
All right, and with now, I guess training this week has been a little wonky with MLS All-Star shenanigans going on. Did you get to go out to practice this week?
I did. I went out on Tuesday. The fun part for me was that they brought, well, other than just watching training, was they brought up Bernie Kamungo and Mulatto, whose name I can't remember, his first name I can't remember, who were 2 of the 3 best players for North Texas. Mulatto's a 9 and Bernie's a wing, so that was replacement for Jesus and Areola. So it was fun watching those guys integrate in. Obviously, they're not quite up to this, the first team training regiment, but it was a reminder that the academies are back training because they're kicking off in like a week or so. So this was a reminder to me of the current state of things, where like the best things in terms of the team pipeline that most might be able to help FC Dallas are actually with North Texas. Like Hope, Kamungo, and Mulatto are far more likely to help this team than anybody in the academy within the next year. I mean, now there's stuff in the academy that's going to help you in 4 or 5 years down, but not like immediately. Whereas the North Texas guys are super close. And I think we're looking at a coach, how much they've talked about helping. You help the team now? I think a lot of these kind of things are going to come down to fresh new spring camp. 3 or 4 guys come in from North Texas. 1 or 2 guys come in from academy, like Antonio Carrera did. And Antonio won himself a homegrown contract. That's the way it's going to happen, I think, with this particular coach, is you're going to have to come into camp and beat out a guy one-on-one and prove that you're a better option than Benny Regic for me to bring you in as a wing, or better than Ima Tuamasi if we're talking like a right back. You got to come in and beat him out, So in some ways that's kind of cool, but it also means that it's going to be really hard for some teenager to get a homegrown deal, in the current vibe.
Yeah, like I said, that feels like that's one of those. That's the beginning of that whole conflict between how this coach wants a certain type of player versus these young guys who historically have seen the opportunity. So that's that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. But it is fun to watch those guys come up and train with the team. And see and just kind of take a measurement of where they are and how they match up, and can you clearly see the differences between their level and the senior team level? So.
You can, but it's mostly about how quickly the ball moves and how quickly the action is, and that's you cannot replicate that from Next Pro to MLS. I mean, Next Pro is a big jump. and stepping into first team training, boy, it is a big step. Both of those guys did fairly well, but you can clearly see that they're not used to it. They both have a lot of things to offer. I think it's more likely Kamungo offers something where they actually need a body than the 9 does. Something Milano might come down. Remember, that's the kid that was the Bayern world talent competition
or whatever,
thing. Mm-hmm. So there's a Bayern influence there, and there's a team he currently belongs to technically in Colombia there. So it's hard to define what his price might be or how many fingers are in that pie. So it's hard to know whether that's like, oh, he looks good, but that's not always as simple as Kamungo is, who they found themselves in just as on their own guy,
Okay. We covered a lot of stuff tonight, Buzz, and we did it without Dan, which hurts.
Yeah. Sorry, Dan.
Not as much fun without our English compatriot. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's some stuff going on with the academy, like I mentioned last week, I think, with the massive influx of players coming in. Apparently, there are even still several that are trying to make a decision this week if they're joining or not. So, I mean, honestly, I'm looking at like 20-plus names up and down the different levels of the academy. It really is an indication, as I mentioned, that recruitment had fallen off and they recognized a couple classes that were deficient. There's also some weird stuff happening with Classic League in terms of FC Dallas Youth. I knew of 1 or 2 teams that were leaving Classic League and coming up to ECNL is developing more national leagues and regional leagues. Apparently FC Dallas pulled, it's just a rumor, I haven't confirmed it yet, but Dallas may have pulled out like almost all their teams out of every single age bracket in the Classic League and left like 1 team each left in the Classic League and moved a bunch of their teams up to these ECNL regional leagues, which is like all of Texas rather than just local, and national leagues, which is similar to the next pro, but obviously much lower level down because there's a couple of tiers of it. But I would assume that's about competing against better teams and getting a broader pool of talent and that, such as things like that. But I'm listening. The landscape at the youth level here, just in Dallas alone, but through MLS and on down, is just constantly evolving. I don't know how anybody keeps up with it at all. There's so much happening down there below the academy level. It's just when I think I'm starting to get a handle on what some of it is, it all changes radically again. It must be such a difficult place to make a living as a coach.
Well, that's pretty significant news. For those who are listening to the pod that don't know all the different nomenclature and stuff, the Classic League is the historic generational youth top-level soccer league that was in this, in this area forever and ever, dating back to when you and I were kids, Buzz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And where the best teams, the old Texans and Kicks
Longhorns.
and Comets and Longhorns and Andromeda, all those guys and girls played in their versions of the Classic League. And so kids that aren't playing in the academy level all play at the Classic League. So the idea that Dallas is pulling their teams out of Classic League to go do ECNL, if in fact that is a true rumor, that would be seismic in our particular soccer community if that in fact is happening.
I mean, somebody told me that at some of the leagues, like half the teams were FC Dallas. So it's like, there must be like a serious compression going on with Classic League. And the difference is just local versus statewide is going to be the difference probably in terms of what's happening.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating process. I don't know enough of the details to tell you why this is happening or even can confirm it officially. I just heard about it from somebody who's a parent, which you'd think they would know since their kid's on one of those teams. And it's you remember the team in the MLS Next playoffs, there was a team that was a surprise U15 team that were like, who the heck is this? It was called FC Dallas Academy 2, they called it. It turned out it was one of these Classic League teams that was making the jump to the ECNL. That was the one team I knew was doing it. Well, now apparently it's a whole bunch of teams that are doing it from FC Dallas. So
interesting.
Someday, eventually, I'll try and find it. We'll find out because people are going to know about it before I can probably get it confirmed. But it's, every time I turn around, the youth landscape is changing. And you hear from coaches that are like, yeah, this other team came in and took like half my players and I had to start over from scratch. It's just got to be crazy out there.
We can never forget that youth soccer in the United States is a multi-billion-dollar business. Follow the money, for sure.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer 90, your source for FC Dallas, North Texas SC, and U.S. national team gear. With everything from jerseys, soccer cards, and scarves, Soccer Nutty has something for everybody. Shop soccernutty.com now, and as listeners of this podcast, you receive 20% off your order when you use the code Third Degree at checkout. Some exclusions may apply.
All right, Buzz. Well, I think we've done ourselves a good service in covering the week in the action of FC Dallas and other stuff. So, and we did it, like I said, without Dan. I don't know how. Somehow we stumbled through this, Buzz, you and I.
Well, he brings a lot of experience in terms of game breakdown, which, today he couldn't join us to break down the Portland game, but I do like those features he does for us most of the time on those games.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. All right. Well, if that is going to be it, I will go eat dinner now. Buzz, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. I'm actually losing my voice. I had to talk too much today.
And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We'll speak to you next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Come back, Dan.
Woo! Woo! Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree Net Podcast. 25 long hard years, yeah. Buzz Carrick, yeah, the man. 25 years, you better be giving this man at least $5 a month. Patreon Third Degree, come on, pay the man. It's the only comprehensive coverage of my fucking club that I love so much. Hey, come on, it's Third Degree or bust. Yes, give the man some money. Hey, Third Degree Net Podcast.